can't believe I'm about to tell you this, but here it goes. Um,
I am Kay Anderson, and you are listening to Lost Spaces, a podcast that mourns the death of queer nightlife. Every episode, I talk to a different person about a venue from their past, the memories they created there, and the people that they used to know. Gregory Douglass is a singer-songwriter born and raised in rural Vermont. Though he's now based in Los Angeles, he still has a soft spot in his heart for 135 Pearl, the only gay bar in the state of Vermont, which closed in 2006. We talked breast reduction parties, making out in the men's bathroom, and sealing the deal with the love of your life. Are you feeling warm and limber and ready to open up about bad haircuts and boys that you've snogged?
only if we continue to always use the word snog, because I never get to say that here.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Oh, I'll throw in some British slang
Yes,
just to impress you.
perfect.
So 135 Pearl.
Yes.
So when I first asked if you wanted to have a chat, what was it about that place that made it the one?
Well, it really was the one. It was the one and only gay bar in the entire state of Vermont, and ever since it's been gone, there hasn't been anything that has filled the void, which is surprising to me and a little frustrating, because you would think that someone in the Vermont community would step up and acknowledge what an important institution that was for so many people. I think now a lot of 135 Pearl was in Burlington, Vermont, which is pretty much the big city of Vermont. I mean, it's a small state with a small population, but that's kind of the big city. And so a lot of people in the greater Burlington area, I think, have sort of come to terms that, like, well, every bar's mixed now and it's okay. And I think a lot of Burlingtonians, am I saying that right? Burlingtonians, is that what you would call someone from Burlington? I think have just sort of like are thinking of themselves as a rather progressive minded people, and they are for the most part, but I think you go a little too far in thinking like, oh, it's fine, we're a progressive town and we're just, we're cool with every bar being mixed. But it's just not the same. It's not, if the LGBT community does not have a safe space, and especially those that are coming of age, I think that's really tragic. So that was 135 Pearl was such a huge part of my coming of age years, figuring out who I was, and so many stories and memories from nights there and from being a part of that community and making friends in that community. I mean, I can't imagine a life where that wasn't the case, where I was just growing up with apps like Grindr and whatever, and that was kind of my only outlet.
So I'm really interested in hearing about your story, but for a bit of context for me, can we talk a little bit about Vermont so I can understand? So it's a state in New England, is that right? Did I get that
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Here, my US geography is brilliant. And New England is distinct from other bits of the US for being a bit left-leaning.
I think that, well, particularly Vermont, I would say that New Hampshire is a little bit different, which is right next to it. New Hampshire looks like an upside down Vermont, and it is in some ways politically, but yeah, I mean, New England is a little bit more, probably a little bit more like the countryside that you're used to, and I think that hence the name New England. But particularly in Vermont, it's just beautiful. There are no billboards. Billboards are illegal in Vermont, so it
Oh,
really
wow.
pronounces the countryside. It's the beautiful green mountains, and I think it's as European as it gets in the States. Like that kind of vibe, that kind of like rolling hills of Ireland or whatever. Um, I don't know. I
Or
haven't even
whatever.
been, so I'm talking like I know, but I actually don't know firsthand. Um, but yeah, and let me rewind and say that there are several incredible LGBT community organizations and youth centers, and there's definitely a lot going on to support the LGBT community there. But 135 Pearl was the only bar, like
Mhm.
nightclub, and frankly the only real dance club, even outside of the LGBT community. It was the only real dance club in town,
Oh,
and
wow.
and there yet and there are plenty of bars, there are plenty of spaces, but nothing has, to my knowledge, has really replaced how much fun people used to have dancing there. Even
Mm.
again, even outside of the LGBT community, like people just had so much fun there. So it was just such a special place, and there's still stuff going on, but again, nothing really has replaced all that 135 Pearl brought to the community.
Mm. So, at what age were you when you first went there?
Well, funny story. I was actually I got a head start with music when I was in high school. I actually didn't go to college. I went to a college prep school, but I did not go to college because I really started to figure out what I wanted to do with music. And back in the day, this was like I graduated in '99, and these were like the golden years of music before the internet changed everything. So we had people like Ani DeFranco paving the way for indie artists like me that wanted to take the DIY, do it yourself model. Like, fuck the labels. We don't need a record label. We can just do it ourselves. And so that's exactly what I did when I got out of school. I just kind of moved back home to Vermont. I lived with my mom for a little while until I realized that like I needed to get to the big city of Vermont and get started with music because all the clubs and coffee shops were there. So I moved to Burlington, and I got a couple roommates, and those were some of my favorite years, living with my roommates and figuring out who I was in a lot of ways, laying the groundwork with my music, and it was just a really great place to be able to do that. And I remember I booked a show at 135 Pearl before I was even 21 years old. And the owner, Robert Toms, was very, very supportive of my music and was cool with me playing there, even though I wasn't technically of age. But because I was the age that I was and I wanted to party with my friends, I ended up sneaking into the bar like I think it was a week or two before I was supposed to play a show there, and my friends just kind of like helped me sneak in, and but then I was busted about like an hour into things.
So they were of
So
age, but you weren't.
yes,
Oh, okay. Oh, and that's
yeah,
so weird. Like, you can't go to clubs until you're 21.
yeah,
Oh, I
yeah.
hadn't even thought about that. Anyway, sorry. So you would be like,
What it
what, 20
what is
then?
it for you guys? 18?
Yeah, 18.
Yeah, same in Canada. Yeah, and it's funny because Burlington is northern Vermont, and so as far as like true big cities go, Montreal is the closest big city to Burlington. It's like barely 2 hours north of Burlington. So a lot of people that grew up in Vermont, especially northern Vermont, would just like go over the border
Mm.
to get their drink on at age 18. So yeah, but so one of the head bartenders there kicked me out, and I was banned from the bar for a while.
For like 3 weeks until you had a gig.
Well, that was that was what was in question at the time, and I was so embarrassed, because Robert was such a sweetheart to even consider booking me being underage. So I called him up and I left him a heartfelt voicemail. Or maybe it wasn't a voicemail. Anyway, it doesn't matter. We had a conversation, and I'm like, I'm so sorry. I'm embarrassed. I don't know what to say. I just made a bad judgment, and uh, I hope that you'll consider keeping the gig, because I'd love to play. I'd still love to play there. And he was like, no worries, like we've all made those decisions before. Like I remember being that age too, and whatever. And it's fine. You can still play here. So he was a sweetheart about it, and I did. I performed there, and once I was of age, I celebrated my 21st birthday there, and so that was definitely memorable. And
Wow.
I've had several drunken, memorable nights there, and definitely have gone home with a few boys there.
Oh, good. Well,
And
we will get on to that. Before we do, I have to say, first of all, like that is so sweet that you got in touch with him. I think the British approach to that would have been just to pretend it never happened and just style it
yeah,
out. So that's quite sweet. The thing I wanted to ask about, so that first time that you went there, as well as all of the anxiety about potentially being caught and thrown out, do you remember the feeling?
yes, no, absolutely. I was totally excited to go. I was well, the friends that I went with obviously were a little older than me, and it's just like I've always had friends that are older than me, so I've always sort of been in a hurry, especially back then. I was in a hurry to just be with my people, and
Mm.
I felt that was like a huge roadblock at the time because I was out on my own. I wasn't going to college, so I was like ready to live my new adult life and find my new sense of independence. So yeah, I was really excited and eager and prowl and all the things.
And how did your expectations match up with the reality?
Well, I didn't have very long that first night because they kicked me out pretty quickly. But it was definitely sensory overload. I remember it was a busy night, and it was two floors. The top floor was the main bar, and there was a pool table in the back room. But what was so endearing about 135 Pearl is that it was in this like big old house. It was like this giant house that was converted into a bar. And I don't know all the history behind it, but what makes it particularly fitting is that I believe it actually used to truly be a whorehouse at one point back in the day.
Ah,
And so and then I don't know what happened in between, but then it ended up um, being being a gay bar. So clearly, it remained a whorehouse.
mm.
Um, and I think that how appropriate, how full circle, right? uh, so
So,
anyway,
so your 21st. Tell me about that.
I went. It was a very diverse group that I partied with. Um, Went out to dinner like people of all ages who were just waiting for me to turn 21 already. And we went out I remember going out for dinner, and then I remember going to Higher Ground and saw a local rockabilly band, I remember. And then the plan was to just end up at 135 Pearl. So, um, frankly, I don't really remember what there were so many experiences there. I just I don't remember what happened when, but oh, you know what? I'm sorry. I am having a memory. So I don't think it was the 21st birthday necessarily. I actually think it was the very first time that I went there, which was the night that I got kicked out. So So my grand entrance to Pearls, I'll bring you back to the layout. So it's this big old house that was converted into a bar. You walk in the front door, you go up a fairly narrow and tall staircase in order to get to the top floor, which is the main floor and the main bar, and then a room in the back with a pool table that looks like it probably was a bedroom at one point. Um, so already like such a quirky space, but I enter, I go up the stairs, and the two of like Vermont's premier drag queens at the time were at the top of the stairs, Yolanda and Cherry Tart, and there they are, and I knew who they were because of their reputation, and they had their own public access show in Burlington at the time. And so I was a little bit starstruck with them, but as soon as I walked in, it was like fresh meat, you know. And Cherry Tart's hand was on my ass, like, you know, within moments, and both of them like fawning over me immediately, and it was very overwhelming, and it was exciting, but it was also unfamiliar to me, so I felt semi-violated, to be honest.
Yeah, you wouldn't get away with
I
that in 2020, would you?
No, I don't think so. Although drag queens can get away with anything still, can't they? But you know, I have perspective on that now. But like at the time, whenever I get uncomfortable, I always get a little angry if I'm uncomfortable.
Okay.
So I just sort of felt angry, and you know, I'm like, hello, I didn't give you permission to do that. So I tried to get away from them pretty quickly. But it's funny to think back on that because Yolanda has since, you know, become a really dear friend, and has been lovely and quite influential at times during significant times in life when I've had to make transitional decisions and whatever. So, you know, I'm really grateful for the people that I've met there. But, you know, at the time it was like I was like a deer caught in headlights, of course.
So, shall we talk about boys?
Always.
So I'm assuming that you may have canoodled once or twice whilst there.
Yes, absolutely.
Where in the bar is your favorite place to strike up a conversation, or not? If you're more into going straight for the kill.
Well, I mean, it wasn't a very big space, you know. It was really there wasn't really much of a place to hide or anything like that. I think it was just more what it was. I mean, the memories that I have are more based on just one thing leading to another kind of thing, and some funny memories too. Like I remember. I can't believe I'm about to tell you this, but here it goes. Um, I remember I remember one of my first jobs out of high school was working at a Barnes and Noble bookstore, and I worked in the music department. And I was there one day, um, and it was kind of a slow day. I remember this tall, beautiful Brazilian boy was walking around there, and he definitely had his eye on me. And I'm a ruthless flirt anyway, so you know it's not that hard. It's not that hard to flirt with me. Um, and I just remember like he was very shy, but he was like very diligent about keeping his eye on me. And then he walked out of the music department, and that was that. You know, I was like just continued working for a half hour, an hour, whatever it was, and then I took a bathroom break and went to the bathroom, which was in a different area of the bookstore. And as soon as I walked into the bathroom, the guy was lingering by the bathroom. So he followed me right into the bathroom, and like rather confidently, I might add. You know, it actually scared me. I didn't really
Oh no,
know how to
did you go into the anger mode?
Yeah, yes, exactly. it was unfamiliar. I didn't really know how to handle a situation like that. Um, and I walked in the bathroom, and before I got to the stall, there was no one in the bathroom. Before I got to the stall, I turned around to look at him, and he just walked right up to me, and he's like a knight in shining armor. He put his hand behind my waist and he pulled me towards him and kissed me, which I could not believe. I mean, first of all, I was just like, wow, that's ballsy. That's really, really ballsy. And I didn't know how I felt about it because I'm like, I don't know who this person is. Like, part of me felt like, how dare he just assume that that's okay?
Mm.
And then the other part of me was just like, he had totally swept me off my feet. Um, and it was a very memorable kiss, and he was super handsome. And I was like, wow. I'm like, okay. I didn't really know what to say. And I said, and I got flustered, and I'm like, I need to get back to work. I didn't even go to the bathroom. Like, I held it. And so I went back to work, and I sort of wondered if he would come back into the music department. And quite a bit of time had passed. I mean, I want to say a few hours had passed.
Oh no, your
And
poor little
then
heart.
and then he actually did sort of he came back in. He was very coy about it. And I and then he sort of approached me, and I talked to him a bit, and he was just like, I'm like, what's your name? And he was new to town and he didn't really know what to do. And I said, well, how about we meet for a drink at 135 Pearl later tonight? And so we did. So he met me there for a drink, and it was more more comfortable in that he didn't, I just didn't know whether this guy was like someone I could trust or not. So I wanted to meet him in a public place,
A
before.
well-lit publicly, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it was fun, and it was flirtatious, and we had drinks, and he, I felt good about him, um and I ended up going home with him that night. And I just remember we got to his house, and I realized, or his apartment, and I realized, like, I've been here before. Like, this place feels really familiar. And then I realized that it was my friend Catherine's old apartment, and I hadn't been there in years, but clearly he lived there now. So that was odd. And I just remember him, he was like such a player. He was just like flirting with me in Portuguese or whatever, and I just remember whatever, I don't know what he was saying to me, but it was sexy. And then that was that. And then, that it just was sort of like a classic one night stand, I guess, that began in a very memorable way.
So there seems to be an interesting theme here of violation of your personal space. And without victim blaming, why do you think that is? Why do you think people feel comfortable manhandling you?
That is a good question. That's a really good question. I've never really thought about it quite like that, and I've thought about this stuff a lot. And I don't know. I mean, I'm sure that there are a lot of layers there. I think that I definitely have a history of being bullied as a kid, and being made fun of for being, I was like super. I can't think of the word. I just want to say super flamboyant, super. What's the word
Okay.
I'm looking for? Effeminate. That's the
Yeah.
word. I was super effeminate when I was a kid, and I didn't really have any male friends for the most part when I
Yeah.
was really young. Like, the boys were afraid of me. I remember even one day in like the second or third grade or something, where there was like a new kid and it was a new boy, and the boys just kind of like were showing him around and introducing him to people. And I remember them saying like, "Oh, well, that's Greg, but you don't need to like talk to him because he's basically just one of the girls." So it was very polarizing back then in the small town that I grew up in, um, and music was such a huge outlet for me. I mean, it kind of like saved me in a lot of
Mm.
ways, and I realized quickly, even when I was younger, that people I wasn't getting respect from, particularly men that I wasn't getting respect from, were starting to respect me because of my music. So so that was a big game changer for me. But there were definitely some hard memories of just being bullied back then. So maybe that has something to do with just the violating aspects.
Hmm. Are you okay to talk about bullying more, or should we move on?
Yeah, yeah, I'm feeling actually better about talking about this stuff because I think it could really I think my truth is only going to help other people feel better about their truths, you know?
Mm, mm. So a lot of what you're saying resonates with me because for me as well, music was a big uh, escape and release and opportunity to connect with people who understood me without having to leave my bedroom. Uh, yeah, it's so interesting how that forms your personality, your um, take on the world, your suspicions of strangers. uh,
Yeah.
this is a bit raw for me right now. That last comment. And I suppose that goes back to what you were saying at the top of the conversation about the importance of queer spaces, in that within that space, there are a few things that you can let your guard down about because you don't have to check to see if anyone has noticed that your behavior doesn't conform to the gender that you're um, displaying necessarily. If you're like a faggy kid like me, um,
Yeah.
and you don't have to assume that at least one person is going to have a problem with your being. Um,
Yes. Yeah.
I'm not sure where I'm going with this, actually. I'm not asking a question, I'm just talking now.
Well,
um,
no, I appreciate that. And I think that you're right on. And it's really, those are the ingredients that make that these type of venues and spaces so important because our community is not the same as we're continuing to grow and evolve in who we are, even just as specific to, not just the LGBT community, but even like who we are as gay men, for example. Like, you know, how fascinating it is to live somewhere like Los Angeles versus
mhm.
little Burlington, Vermont, where you get on an online dating app like or a hookup app like Grinder, and you see how even that's evolved, how many people are in open relationships, how organized and responsible everything is these days in terms of like profiles listing who you are and what you're looking for and what position you are and what the status is of the last time you were tested and
Mm.
whether you're on prep or not. And it's just there's a real um, there's a real liberation that continues to expand and evolve, that is also accompanied by a much greater responsibility and mutual respect, I feel. And it's really wonderful to see that. But in order for that to happen, you have to feel like you can coexist with other people, with a community that can relate and knows what you're going through, because it's not this heteronormative system that we've grown up in and that we have gotten so accustomed to.
Mm.
So we're all sort of treading in new waters and operating in ways that really speak more to who we are than who we're not.
Mm.
So it's important that the support is there and that the structure and systems are there and support in so many ways. Support from each other, support from the organizations and venues that exist to provide that kind of support and the health support, all of it.
Mm. Um, so you've brought up Grinder, so my mind's going there, and I'm going to take the conversation in that way. So sorry, but I'm kind of fascinated by what a disruptor it has been to the scene, but as well as the way that people categorize themselves, because it enables you or makes you categorize yourself, and makes you market yourself, I suppose, because you're looking for a shag. Um, how do you think things would have been different for you if you had had that tool when you were coming out?
Well, it probably would have been a blessing and a curse. I think that I would have been very quickly out of control with having that kind of access so easily and readily.
Mm.
But at the same time, I think the times always reflect. Yeah, what am I trying to say? I think technology has been a disruptor across the board, really. In the online dating community to the music industry to all of it. I just think that it's just been a giant disruptor, and we've all had to adapt accordingly. And so it like anything else, it feels like a blessing and a curse. It feels like there are a lot of advantages to being able to make use of an app like Grindr, where there's a lot of information there to really have to work with. But
Mm.
on the other hand, you would make very different decisions because, like you said, it's really more about how well are you marketing yourself on an app like that, because
Mm.
it really becomes much more about the marketing. And I think that's kind of the curse of it as well, because if you're not so good at marketing yourself, there's just so many deeper ways to get to know someone that would totally change your mind about them. And if you're judging a book by its cover right away and being dismissive of that right away, then, you know, I mean, my husband and I have been together for 15 years and
Wow.
we've been married for, it will be 10 years in September, which is, like what, like a lifetime in gay years, right?
Or just in
And
any years, let's not.
yeah, yes. But it took almost 2 years for me to take that relationship seriously because there's a lot to maneuver through. There's a lot, we were on and off for the first year and a half at least. And a lot of that was just due to me not feeling comfortable with someone with a healthy relationship, with someone that truly has the emotional sophistication that he has, and we came from very different upbringings, and um, I jumped to conclusion about a lot of things that I have since learned were not accurate, and there's a real process involved in making a good relationship good and making it work. And I would not want to be I would not want to be single and dating in Los Angeles in 2020 because it's just too easy, especially out here where everyone is so pretty. Everyone is pretty in LA. And so it's very easy to judge a book by its cover, and it's very easy to dismiss someone because there's a million other options.
Mm.
And that's really tragic in some ways because no one is taking the time that is truly actually required to get to know a person before you can even make a true judgment call.
Mm. Yeah. Like if I was 18 and had Grinder, I mean, oh, who's kidding? I would have downloaded it at like 15. But if I had it at that age, like, wow, I just think that's kind of, yeah, it's like exhilarating, but also crippling in terms of what that gives you access to. And I think also, yeah, as an artist, like you need to be bored. You need to have lots of time with your thoughts. And I imagine I would have turned out a lot differently. A lot differently? That's not right, is it? Very, oh, well, you know what I'm trying to say. Um,
Yes.
if I had that, like I wouldn't have had all those points of reflection. I wouldn't have had that opportunity to develop and really think about who I was, because I would be thinking so much about who I wanted to be for other people to accept me.
Hmm.
Weird. Anyway, sorry. That was a bit of a detour. Shall we get back into the bar?
You know, I think that is a really, really good point that you just made because and it's helping me to better understand younger generations. You know, like I have a 17-year-old nephew, and I have friends that have kids that are now in their early to mid 20s, and they grew up with this technology. That's all they know. In fact, I have a couple high school songwriting students that when I first asked them, like, okay, well, what artists or what bands are you guys listening to right now? And they were sort of stumped by that question. They're like, well, you mean, I guess I like, I guess there might be a couple, like two or three songs that I like from the same artist or the same band, but for them, it's all about playlists.
Yeah, yeah.
They grew up in they're growing up in this world of playlists, and so it's not about a single art, it's about songs, and how they are experiencing that is so different from how I grew up and how so it's just like
Yeah, because like when you were a kid and you had like you didn't have any money, well, maybe some kids did, but I certainly didn't. And you bought an album, like you had invested in that album. So even if you didn't
yes,
enjoy it, you had to keep listening to it. You just put it on and on and on until you learned to like it because you'd spent however
exactly.
much money on it. And now you can just be like, nah, this doesn't grabbing me. Now I'll just go to the next one.
Yep, that is exactly it. And doesn't that reflect the dating experience?
Ah, oh yes, full circle there.
Yeah, I mean, that's just it. I think everything has been disrupted and everything has changed in those ways. And so I'm fascinated to learn how or to observe how younger people are maneuvering this and
Mm,
how it's affecting them.
mm.
But I feel like I want to go back to the point that you made before, which is now escaping my mind because my short-term memory is terrible.
Oh no.
Um, because you said something that made me that I wanted to.
Spending time on your own, reflecting, grinder.
Hmm. Spending time on your own and reflecting.
Figuring out who you are.
Figuring out who you are, that's it.
Okay.
So so I mean, you're absolutely right. I'm seeing what I'm observing so far of these younger generations are 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 almost this stunted emotional growth in the ways that you just touched upon. Like, it seems to me like younger people are having a harder time figuring out who they are because they're not having the same experiences or the same opportunities we did to have that alone time and to have that the time to get familiar with the people we're meeting because we met them in person and not online,
Mm.
or to get familiar with the album that we bought because we spent good money on that, and that's what has deepened our appreciation for the artist that we love. I think it's all very parallel.
Mm. So I'm aware that we both sound like really grumpy old men right now. So I will say that the flip side of all of that is that, at least we're not having kids that are experiencing this complete disconnect between the feelings that they're having and the heteronormative world around them, because there are some examples that they can see of other people, other genders and other sexualities that doesn't make them feel so isolated.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah,
that's my TED
absolutely.
talk for today. So if we get back to the bar, one of the things I was really interested in talking about is uh, small town. So like a small town queer space, um, or just being in a small town means that there is a far higher likelihood that someone has slept with someone that you might be about to sleep with, um, or that if you're in the bar and someone is hitting on you, your ex-boyfriend might be 5 meters away and throwing daggers at you. I wondered
Yes.
if you had any examples of things like that happening to you.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that those examples were what triggered the most heated and upsetting memories that I have, like absolutely, like having a having a boyfriend who then dumped me to date my ex-boyfriend.
Wait.
So
Oh, wow. How did you find out about that?
well, like you said, it was a small town. It didn't take long, and it's not like it was even really being intentionally concealed from me. It was just how it was, slim pickings. uh, so
So,
that yeah, that was tough.
and so, like, were you were you far enough over each of them or not? I mean, it
Oh no, not
sounds
at
like no.
all.
Oh, okay.
Not at all.
Oh,
Yeah, it was tough,
yeah.
but
That's a head
you
fuck.
know, yeah, I'm not proud to say that I've been in quite a few quite a few of those type of quagmires actually, and in some cases it's been I was the one that was screwed over, and in other cases someone else got hurt. So
And so, did you throw any tantrums in the bar that we can talk about?
I don't think that I think all of my tantrums were in private.
Oh,
Um, but I'm trying to think of some good memories um, that are bar related. Well, okay, I got a good one. So I do remember being at Pearl's one night, and I got really flirty with an adorable blue-eyed redhead boy,
mm-hmm.
and he he was very very, I don't want to say aggressive, but he was very forward, and it didn't take long for him to talk me into going home with him that night.
So here's a
And
continuation of that theme that we were talking about before.
you're right, and it's interesting to me. It makes me think that I haven't really been very honest with myself, because I've always felt like I was the one to be I've always felt like I've been the one to put on to be forward about what I want,
Hmm.
and who I want to flirt with, or who I want to hook up with. But I don't think that's true, actually, because I'm bringing up all of these stories where that's not the case. Um, but it is interesting that these are the stories that stand out the most to me, probably because I probably because they weren't the majority,
Yes. Yeah. So they're
you
novel.
know, and
Yeah.
yeah, so maybe they did make me feel good about, made me feel a little bit more desired than I tended to feel, especially at that time. But anyway, yeah, just trying to piece that together. So, redhead, blue eyes, adorable. Um, I went home with him that night and proceeded in having the most awkward sexual experience with him.
Do
It
go
was
on.
just it was just not good. It was just bad. It was just we were not compatible. I think maybe he thought we were more compatible than I thought we were. But it was just awkward and it was not fun and I could not wait to get out of there. Um, there was no flow, there was no passion. It was just awkward.
Just ugh. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, ugh, why did I do this against my better judgment? I thought he was cute, but like intuitively, if I had trusted my instinct, I probably knew deep down it wasn't going to be very, I think I knew it was going to be kind of a train wreck. Um, and so I kind of rushed out of there afterwards. And the next morning, I realized that I had left a ring. At the time, I had this thumb ring that I wore a lot that I really loved. And I left it there. I'd forgotten it there, which first of all I was like, God damn it! Now I have to like go get this ring from him, and I don't want to I don't want to deal with this guy again. Um, Second of all, he probably thought that I left it there intentionally because I wanted to see him again, and I'm like, oh man, this is not good. I sort of avoided it for a few days. My best friend and I went to Pearl's to 135 Pearl on a weekend night, a couple days later, I guess, and it was pretty busy there. And what do you know? The blue-eyed redhead showed up, and he was there, and he had been there for a while. He was already like three sheets to the wind. You could tell right away that he had already had quite a few drinks, and I was trying to avoid him a little bit. It was busy enough that I could kind of avoid him for a bit. I at least needed a drink before I was ready to confront him. And so we talked for he's like, yeah, he's like, you left your ring and whatever, and like I'd love to see you again. And he was sort of blissfully ignorant too. He was not reading my energy at all. Um,
Oh,
and
don't you wish you
like
had that ability?
I mean, I think I'm pretty good at reading people's energy, which is why I'm always amazed when other people can't at all.
Oh yeah, but I think I'm pretty good at reading people's energy, which is why I'm always crippled with fear.
Oh. Oh, well, I don't know. I think it can be I think it can be a blessing because when you know how to read a person's energy, I think it can give you an advantage if you
If you
choose to look
use
at
it
it that way.
well, yes, yeah, yeah. But likewise, if you're just completely ignorant to the way people are responding to you, you can just kind of go about your business without worrying about anyone.
Well, that's true. Yeah, that is true. Um, I remember getting progressively more intoxicated throughout the evening, trying to avoid him, but also trying to have a good time. And it got busier. I remember it was like a particularly packed night. There were a lot of people there. It was like hard to even walk around. Um, and after one too many Cosmos, it just sort of hit me all at once. I was like, oh, I am drunk. And I just remember going downstairs and I'm thinking like, where is my friend Allison? Like, and I went to look for her. I went downstairs. I went into the dance floor area and karaoke was happening. And there is my friend Allison on stage, like in the middle of singing the song Queen of Hearts by Juice Newton, which I thought was the most hilarious. I mean, I guess you had to be there, but it was like the most hilarious memory that I had because I'm like, of all songs that you pick to sing, it's Queen of Hearts by Juice Newton. I thought it was the most random song she could have picked. And so I'm laughing, I'm standing there laughing hysterically, and the song ends, and start singing "Crazy for You" by Madonna, and I turn around at one point, like mid song, and the blue-eyed redhead is behind me, and he's like, and he's so drunk at this point, and he looks at me. He's like, "Are you listening to these lyrics? Because I'm crazy for you," or something like that. And I was like, and I just could not even hold back. And I said to him, I'm like, that is the cheesiest thing anyone has ever said to me. And I'm like, look, I'm sorry, but the feeling is not mutual. Like, I think you're a really sweet guy, but it's not going to happen. And, I wish you the best. And I mean, it was fine. It was fine after that, but it was awkward.
I mean, I'm writing this down as a potential future pickup line, so I mean, it wasn't a waste. I'm gonna get use out of it.
Perfect.
Um, and so, do you remember hearing about the bar closing?
Yes.
Were you still living in Burlington at the time?
Yep. And what is heartbreaking about this story is that Robert Toms was the owner of 135 Pearl, and he actually was very vocal about needing to move on from the business. It was a personal choice. He had been doing it for a while, and he was ready to pass the torch to someone in the community. He was very vocal about that, and he kept the bar on the market for a few years, I believe, at least 2 years. And he turned down a lot of good offers from people that wanted to turn it into something else. And he was very vocal about, like, who's going to step up and keep this bar in business? Because this is important. I'm not walking away because I don't want it to remain an institution in the community. He was just ready to pass the torch, but no one would step up to the plate. And so he finally caved, and sort of was and announced that too, like, this is your last chance, because I can't hold out for much longer. So sadly, he finally just caved, and he sold it, and it became a Papa John's pizza.
Oh.
Isn't that tragic?
Oh, yeah, that's not great.
Yeah.
Why do you think no one stepped up?
I really don't know. I really don't know, and I'm still very sad. I remember feeling very disappointed in the community at the time. There wasn't really much I felt like I could do. I mean, I didn't have the money to step up and do anything, and that really wasn't what I felt like my calling was anyway. But I can only imagine a lot of people probably felt the same way. But I wonder if the right people were informed. He was very vocal about it, but who knows how many people know the truth about that story? Because I remember the reaction in the community once word got around that it was becoming a Papa John's pizza. People were really appalled by that and really disappointed by that. But it's like, well, it's not like he didn't try to keep it what it was. So I really don't know.
Yeah, it's that got till it's gone, isn't it?
Yeah. But I will also mention that there were so many stories and so many memories and so many friendships and significant things that happened for me that were tied to 135 Pearl. Things pretty much sealed the deal between my husband and I at 135 Pearl. And that's a great story too, because I had met him at a show. One of his best friends at the time was a big fan of my music, so he surprised her and brought her to a show of mine. And he was not that familiar with my music, and I had never met him before, but he was a little bit familiar because of his friend Melissa had played some of my stuff for him and whatever. So they came to my show. This was not at 135 Pearl, but it was more of like a listening room type of venue. And he was rather obnoxious at the show. Like he was just sort of like a little bit of a heckler in the back. And I remember he said, like, play song number 9 on the Teeter album. And I was like, really? Like, I don't know what number the song, like, and I said, I'll tell you what, if you tell me, if you figure out what the song title is that you want me to play, then I might play it for you. So he ended up going and figuring it out, and then he yelled out like a song later that he wanted me to play a song called I Wonder. And I'm like, oh, you mean the song that I just played like a couple songs ago? So clearly he wasn't paying attention and he was kind of obnoxious. And but I couldn't really see him that well because he was like in the back. And afterwards, I met up with him, and his friend Melissa introduced me to him, and I was with my boyfriend at the time. So the four of us were meeting each other, and we all decided to get drinks after. And I sort of changed my mind a bit once I was up close meeting him, because he was just such a handsome guy. And and all four of us went out for a drink, and I got to know him a little bit better and realized like what a family man he was. His sister had just given birth to her first child, and he was going to go home for the summer to help her out and help raise his nephew. And I thought that was really sweet. And, I just remember he made a good impression on me, but so I didn't see him again until the end of that summer. And by that time, my boyfriend and I at the time were no longer together. And I had run into Glenn, like in downtown Burlington, and I was like, oh, it's great to see you. And, I have a show coming up. If you want to check it out, maybe bring your friend Melissa again. And they did. They came. It was just, I think it was like the next night or something. And they came, and I talked to them both after the show. Now, you have to understand that Melissa is like a very honest, she doesn't hold back on anything. She's hilarious and outspoken and whatever. So at one point, Glenn goes to the bathroom, and she looks at me and she's like, so what do you think, Glenn? Gay? Not gay? Like what? What is your read on him? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, you're his best friend. You tell me. And she's like, well, we all think that he is, but like, we're not sure. Like, he won't come out with it. I'm like, oh, well, I'll let you know by the end of the night, And he came back from the bathroom, and I was just like, well, I got to go because I have to go to this party a friend of mine is having at 135 Pearl. And it was a friend it was a going away party, but it wasn't because she was going away. She was just having she was having a breast reduction surgery. And so she threw a going away party for her boobs, basically. Which was hilarious, and a perfect theme party for 135 Pearl. So I was going to go there and make an appearance, and I said, well, you guys are happy to, are welcome to come along if you want. And Melissa had other things to do, so she decided not to go. But Glenn was very quick to say, oh, I'll go. So I'm like, okay, well, you realize that 135 Pearl is a gay bar, right? And he's like, yeah, I know. And I'm like, okay, all right. So he accompanied me to the party, and we both proceeded in, drinking quite a bit. And the more he drank, the more hands-on that he got with me, the more sort of clingy he got, and which was I was a little bit surprised with, but also kind of not surprised. Like, okay, well, that explains a lot.
But you also
And
said earlier that you're a massive flirt. So had you not been flirting?
oh,
Oh,
absolutely.
okay, okay.
But I just didn't think he would be that quick to
Respond.
be
Okay.
affectionate, especially in public. If he was this like total closet case that Melissa was explaining that he was. So it didn't take him long to feel comfortable being affectionate with me in public. So I think that in many ways uh, it was like, okay, well, this is definitely his comfort zone now. And he invited me to come home with him, which at the time I was like, I had gotten you. I know I told you a lot of other stories that were from way back in the day, but at that time I had gotten pretty used to feeling discouraged in my love life and feeling like I was always the one that had to make the first move. So I was impressed that he was making the first move, and he was very respectful and gentlemanly about it, um, and so the rest is history, I guess. I mean, we spent a lot of time together, but I didn't take it too seriously at first. And at one point, I said, look, like I've been out of the closet since I was 14 years old, and I'm not interested in being your secret boyfriend. So either let's call it a day, or you know, like I just wasn't taking it too seriously. And then he quickly came out of the closet to everyone. He said, "Well, I care about you. I want you to take this seriously." And so he came out to his friends and his family, like all within the same week. And he sort of he really stepped up to the plate and was determined to win me over.
Oh wow. So obviously that's like a hugely romantic big thing, but my instant go to in that kind of scenario would be to panic, freak out that someone had done something so momentous for me. Um, what was that? What how did that feel?
Oh, absolutely. I freaked out. And I didn't, I couldn't take him seriously for like a year and a half, like, we were on again and off again because once things started to get too real, I would freak out again and, uh, and break up with him, but I couldn't keep my hands off of him. After enough time would go by, I just kept thinking about him, and he's so adorable. I mean, I still have a crush on him after all
Mm.
these years. He's just like, you know, he's just I don't know. He's got such a magnetism to him. But each time that I would break up with him, he would handle it well. He'd be like, "Okay,
Oh, that
well,
bastard.
I know." He'd be like, "All right, well, this is not what I want, but like if that's what you need, then I understand." And that really it made it harder in the moment, but it also made me realize just how much just the level of his emotional maturity.
Mm.
And I have since learned how much that stems from his upbringing. And he had a really he's got a really good loving family that he never had any reason to he just he wouldn't take it personally quite like most people would. So I was really impressed with that, and clearly I knew I had a lot to learn from that. So, and we've been together for a long time now, and I'm still surprised and amazed at he always surprises me. Like we we're on our own individual journey of like growth and self-expansion, but we continue to grow and expand together as well. And it's always in interesting ways that I really appreciate. And we've kind of learned how important it is to have a really high level of open communication at all times, and that's gotten us through all sorts of stuff. So, he's become like my best friend in ways that I just never would, in ways that I've never known before with anyone else. And I do think again that can be credited towards giving each other a chance and that higher level of communication, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable. And it all really happened, it all really started at 135 Pearl.
Did you ever go to 135 Pearl? Well, if you did, I would love to hear from you. Tell me your stories and share any photos or anecdotes through social media. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter under the username KAndersonMusic. And you can find out more about Gregory Douglass at www.gregorydouglass.com, and that's Douglas with 2 S's. Lost Spaces is not only a podcast, but a concept record as well. I've been writing songs about queer venues and the people who used to live their lives there, and will be releasing songs over the coming year. You can hear the first single, Well Groomed Boys, which also happens to be playing underneath my talking right now on all streaming platforms. If you liked this episode, I would really appreciate if you subscribed, left a review on Apple Podcasts, or just told someone who you think might also be interested in listening. I am Kay Anderson, and you have been listening to Lost Spaces.